Good morning. Today we're going to look at our next lesson in Unit 11, and this one is all about data displays. Not so much us doing the displaying this time. It's going to be more about us looking at graphs and interpreting and answering questions. So let's get started. So just a little backtrack to first semester. It says to write the following phrases in algebraic terms. This is more just like a check-in to make sure that we remember what these words really mean. So if we look at this, it's got the words more than. So it says 3 more than 2. So it's saying we're starting with the value of 2 and adding 3. This would be the algebraic terms. I'm not going to, or my next step, I'm sorry, so would be to put 2 plus 3 equals 5. So there's two parts to this, the writing in algebraic terms and then solving it. 7 less than 9 will not, less than means subtract. So I start with 9. It's saying start with 9 and take 7 less than that. So there's my algebraic terms. Solving it would give me 2. Just a little refresher. All right. So sometimes we want to compare data, and there's going to be two types of displays that we can use. Today we're going to look at a double bar graph, and this uses bars to compare two sets of data, kind of similar to what we did with the histogram. Then we have a double line graph, and that's going to compare changes in two sets of data over time. And both of these graphs are going to have a legend or a key that explains what data are being compared. So let's jump right in. Here we can look over here and see that we have the title. So we're looking at lunch choices. It tells us for the annual class picnic, each student voted for his or her favorite meal. And here we can see that we have our legend over here. Orange means 5th graders, yellow means 4th graders. Okay, so which lunch received more than 10 votes from a single grade? So what I'm going to do is look over at my graph, and I'm going to look at the 5th graders. Sorry, they had a vote of 8, 2, I can even write on here if I want. This means that 2 people wanted egg salad. 4 people wanted hamburgers, and 18 people wanted turkey sandwiches. If I look at the 4th graders, I've got 10, 8, they really like egg salad, I guess, 12, and 6. So it says received more than. So even though the 4th graders had exactly 10 people wanting spaghetti, that's not more than 10. So my only two options would be hamburgers from the 4th graders and turkey sandwich. I'm just going to put turkey from the 5th graders. Now, it says which lunch was most popular with the 5th graders and with the 4th graders. And actually, we can say it was both of these. These two answers match what we have here. The most popular means had the most votes. So for the 5th graders, it would have been turkey sandwiches. For the 4th graders, it would have been hamburgers. It says how many more students chose hamburgers than egg salad? So what I'm going to do, it says more students. It's not talking about one particular grade. So for egg salad, I had a total of 10 people want egg salad. And for hamburger, I had 16 people. If I'm adding these together, I get 8 plus 2 is 10, 4 plus 12 is 16. So I'm going to take 16 minus 10 equals 6. 6 more people wanted hamburgers than egg salad. So this is an example of a double bar graph. Let's look at another one. It says a principal does a survey of how many students are in each 4th grade class. So some schools are so big that they have multiple teachers for one grade. So like here we see that Miss Weston has both the purple represents girls, or pink, I don't know what color you'd call that, and blue represents boys. So she's got girls and boys, and this represents how many students she has in her class. Mr. Baker has this many students. These represent the students by girls and boys that are in his class. All right. So it says, who has the most students? Well, it's very easy to look at something and say, oh, well, clearly this is the tallest one, so that must mean that Mr. Baker had the most. However, we need to double check that because we need to check when we compare or when we combine the two genders. So for girls, here she had 10. For boys, she had 16. So that makes a total of 26 students. Mr. Baker, I'm thinking of our Mr. Barker, I guess, had 10 girls, 20 boys. Miss Lee had 8 girls and 4 boys. And Mrs. Thomas had 10 girls and 12 boys. So if we add those values together, we see that the person who had the most students was Mr. Baker. And it says how many boys are in Mrs. Lee's class. So I'm going to find Mrs. Lee. She's right here. And say, okay, for the boys only, she had 4 boys. And it says how many more boys does Mr. Baker have than Miss Weston? So Mr. Baker has 20 boys. Ms. Weston has 16. So I would take 20 minus 16, and that would give me 4. 4 more boys. I'm not going to make us write full sentences today, but please go ahead and label them. 4 boys, 4 more boys. You don't have to write a full sentence, just give it a label. All right, try this one on your own and then come back and check your answers. All right, so I filled in some work over here. I labeled my bars with how much money was raised for each cause. You see that it's being broken down by month. Make sure you're reading very carefully. You can look at oftentimes at the title and then at the legend, and that can really help, but also read that intro. So in May, how much more money was raised for hunger than for parks? For hunger in May, there was $8 and parks had $6, so $2 more. Which cause received the most donations? So I looked at the total. Parks raised $8, animals $20, and hunger raised $12. So animals raised the most money with $20. And then how much more money was donated in May than in April? So what I had to do here was add up how much money was raised in May, how much in April. In May, we had $6, $14, and $8, so I added those together and got $28. Then for April, we had 2, 6, and 4, and adding those together, I got 12. So when I subtracted those, I got $16 more in May than in April. All right, so sometimes we're going to look at line graphs and double line graphs. So it says the students at Warren Middle School are raising money for stadium renovations. How much money did the 7th graders raise in August? So we see that the horizontal axis is measuring the time, or the month in this case. The green is our 7th graders, and our maroon is the 8th graders. So how much money did the 7th graders raise in August? So I'm going to go to August, and I'm going to follow that up until I connect with the 7th graders. This is the 8th graders, but I don't care about their value. I'm going up, up, up till I meet the 7th graders. And it looks like they raised $100. So I'm going to say that they raised $100. Who raised the most money in February, and by how much? So I'm going to look at February and look at these values here. Which one is higher? 8th grade. And to figure out how much higher, I'm going to take the values and subtract them. So 8th graders raised $70. 7th graders raised $10. So that means that the 8th graders raised $60 more. And then in which month did the classes combine to raise the most money and the least? So what I need to do is say, okay, combined, how much did they raise in February? I'm going to switch colors because it's getting a little overcrowded with the red. So in February, they raised $80. 70 plus 10 gives me 80. I've got 50 plus 10 gives me 60. In April, we have 150. In May, we have 30. June, we have 80 and 40, which is 120. In July, we've got 90 and 10, which would be 100. August, we have 130. In September, we have 40 and 30, which would be 70. So looking at this, it seems like this is the most money raised. So it looks like in April, they raised the most. But then they also want to know for the least. And the lowest of those numbers is 30. So we're going to have May was the least. All right. So now we are looking at some students at Hillsdale High School comparing how much reading was assigned to them by various teachers. Maybe the students are saying, Mr. McCarthy's the meanest. No, Mrs. Morrison's the meanest. They assign us the most. And they want to compare. So they're using the day of the week and what they were assigned and how many pages they were assigned. Guys, they're getting assigned 90 and 100 pages. You should be very thankful for some of your teachers. We don't assign you that much. Okay, that was kind of a joke. Anyway, how many pages of reading did Mr. McCarthy assign on Thursday? So I'm going to go to Thursday, and I'm going to find Mr. McCarthy. Well, he's this green color. So I'm going to follow this graph up until I meet Mr. McCarthy's point, and that would be 50 pages. Then it says, how many more pages of reading did Mrs. Morrison assign than Mr. McCarthy? Now, this means overall. It didn't give us a specific date. So we're going to have to add up how much each person assigned. So for Mrs. Morrison, I'm just going to put Mrs. M. She gave, and I'm going to go through like the purple, and she assigned 90, then 80, then 40, 30, 100, 40, and 60. So doing some quick math here, it looks like we've got 100, 200, 310, 400, 440. Double check my math, and if I made a mistake, you can let me know. But I think that's correct. For Mr. M, it is going to be 20, 40, 70, 100, 50, 30, 40. Okay, so that would be 100, 200, 350, it looks like. So what we would need to do, actually that answers this last question. Through the course of the week, who assigned more reading? We see that it was Mrs. McCarthy. And then it wants to know how many more pages of reading did she, oh, sorry, Mrs. Morrison. I mixed up their names. They're both M names. Mrs. Morrison. How many more pages did she assign than Mr. McCarthy? So I'm going to take 440 minus 350, and that would give me 90 pages. She assigned 90 pages of reading more than Mr. McCarthy. Try this one, pause the video, and then come back. All right, check your answers here. How much did the basketball team raise during October? Remember not to stop at the first graph you come to. Pay attention to this legend or the key. It's saying that the basketball team is in gold, so we have to go all the way to the basketball team, and they raised $90 in October. Then if we look at September versus August for just the football team's in blue, so we're looking at 70 versus 30, and so we'd subtract those and get $40 more in August and September. And then that should say raised, more money in June. So if I'm looking at June, that's why I put a circle here, I see that the basketball team came out ahead, and I took their value minus the football team's value and subtracted those to get $40 more. That's it. Head on over to Google Classroom and take a look at your assignment for the day.